Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Two-Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin reporting from New York. Major breaking news this evening as we come on the air. Special counsel Jack Smith sought permission to dismiss the two U.S. federal court cases against former President Donald J. Trump, putting an end to the lengthy investigations that never produced a trial but led to enduring changes in the legal landscape over a president's immunity from prosecution. Here's Two-Way special legal correspondent Matt Gates.
Trump for being 100% not guilty, but I want all Americans to remember this. If we had somehow not prevailed in this election, Jack Smith would not be dismissing these charges. He would be proceeding to trial. And though this monumental victory was won for all Americans led by President Trump, we have to remember, just like we came within fractions of fractions from civil war, when President Trump survived an assassination attempt, we also were just fractions away from these people trying to throw Donald Trump in prison. So while all of us are grateful for this victory, for Trump, it was victory or prison, because he wasn't going to get a fair trial. It was going to be some knockdown, drag-out deal with a predetermined outcome. So enjoy the victory, President Trump, but the rest of us have to do all we can to ensure that no one is ever put in this type of a situation again, and we make America great again.
Oh my goodness. In other news, in the supposed newscast that I'm doing, a really weird story coming out of Mar-a-Lago, longtime Trump aide Boris Epstein, being accused by some around the transition of trying to sell access to positions and recommendations for big piles of money. We're talking bigger piles of money than a former vice president's son would get in a retainer from Burisma, just for instance. The allegations have been investigated by the transition team, and it doesn't seem like any actions will be taken against Boris Epstein. But what a weird story. You can read all about it on the interweb. And I'm sure there'll be more reporting on that in the coming days. If the allegations are true, they're quite eye-popping. But Boris deserves peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace. So just wait before you reach any conclusions. But it would be a story that would rock a normal presidential transition. As we like to say in Mar-a-Lago, they call it Monday. Finally, on the Republican side, the New York Times has a profile of former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, which suggests, as we all suspect, that Mitch McConnell will take no small amount of pleasure in belittling the new Trump administration. Continue to watch, as I wrote this morning in my newsletter, Murkowski 1 plus Collins 2 plus McConnell 3 equals no margin of error for Senate votes requiring 50, including confirmation of Trump's cabinet choices. On the Democratic side, news from Jamie Harrison, the outgoing chair of the Democratic National Committee. The election. How are you guys liking this phone newscast? Making me a little edgy. Anyway, the election for Democratic chair is going to be February 1, and they're going to have a series of forums in January where those who seek to be the Democratic chair will be able to make the case to the public. Those will be open. We, of course, have invited all the chair candidates to come appear here on Two-Way to take questions from you, the great American people. If you'd like to ask a question tonight, please raise your hand. More on that in a moment. Finally, a few items. First, we always like to hear from our viewers of Two-Way. This is a particularly interesting viewer who sent in his testimonial and a request to appear on the program.
Turrentine, it's your favorite president. I listen to Two-Way app every single morning. It's like my morning kofifi. You and Mark do a tremendous job, and of course, Sean Spicer, who's a great guy, great friend of mine, although some of you have said some nasty things about me. I wanted to wish you a lovely week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and I would love to be a guest on the Two-Way show anytime before the new year. God bless you all.
All right, that man tweeted that out. I can tell from the reactions I see on the screen that not everybody's anxious to have him on a guest on the program. Finally, this evening, before we bring in our guests and your questions, We never like to be in the news when we're journalists, but occasionally something happens on two-way that's so newsworthy that it can't help but be covered. I give you Exhibit E. So, I never went to journalism school, but I understand it. If you burp and then cough, you get something on Twitter. All right, enough of the hijinks. Thank you for joining. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, peace, love, and understanding has got to be the order of the day. So please don't put trash in the chat. If you're watching here on the platform, thank you for coming. Please, if you'd like to be part of the conversation, raise your hand. We have two extraordinary guests tonight, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. You can ask whatever you want when you're called on. As always, extend the presumption of grace to all. And please, please try to be as interesting as the two videos we just showed. And our special correspondent, Matt Gates, who I hope joins us later in the hour. All right, two guests tonight. I'll tell you about them in reverse order. Super excited to, oh my goodness. I'm just looking at all the great people we have on. First guest we're bringing on will be Ed Rogers. Ed is a extraordinary Washington institution in and of himself. He's been around politics for several generations. You won't think that when you see how youthful he looks. Big Alabama football fan. He hails from Alabama, and now he works in Washington, where he has for many years. Ed will tell us what he thought about the outcome of the presidential race and take your questions. You cannot speak to a more knowledgeable person about Washington, the Republican Party, America, or American politics than Ed. And then Thomas Peters, who is an expert on texting, political texting. He's very accomplished in this. He's worked for a lot of winning campaigns, some losing campaigns, but he's going to help explain to us why you get so many texts, maybe even if you don't want to get so many, how to stop getting so many texts, and how the business of political texts works. So I'm looking forward to that 101 with Mr. Peters. We're grateful to both for joining us. So without further ado, or more faux newscasting, please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome the one, the only, Ed Rogers. Ed, couldn't be happier for you to be here. Thank you for joining. Hold on, you're muted, Ed. Hold on, start over. Thank you for joining, Ed.
Your correspondent on location in Alabama today. Roll Tide.
You are in Alabama. What is that behind you? That thing that looks like, I don't know what it looks like.
That is speaking of faux, that is a faux window made from camel bone that I picked up in Oman maybe 30 years ago.
Okay. Alabama got humiliated this weekend. What happened?
I haven't fully processed it yet, and I think it's sort of the thing that we should not speak of just yet.
Okay, let's move on.
But I feel good about the Iron Bowl. I feel good about it.
Okay. Who are they going to play?
The one they call Auburn.
Auburn. Okay.
My wife's alma mater.
It's a good intrastate contest. All right. So Ed, I touted you this morning, and I meant it. It wasn't faux. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met, and you really understand politics. But you thought Kamala Harris was going to win.
Well, yes. And I'm a hand wringer and a fretter, and I manage my own expectations. Despite John McIntyre and my allegiance to Real Clear Politics, I just didn't think Trump was going to get there.
So what did you misjudge? What were the factors that you did not take into sufficient consideration?
I thought that the close head-to-head polls were just wrong. That she had more women coming out, she had more young people coming out. I mean, I thought at the time, the concerts, these aren't crazy. This is working for a young person's turnout. And I thought the Roe v. Wade thing would just create a bigger tide. And so I sort of refused to believe it.
As a student of presidential campaigns, what are the things you think the Trump campaign, not Trump himself, but the Trump campaign did that was smart, that contributed to his victory?
Good question. I can't wait to read the informed books. But Trump didn't have a positive moment in his campaign since the garbage truck. And the garbage truck was just the garbage truck. And I thought the campaign was finishing sloppy, finishing weak. And again, I was fretting and hand-wringing over that. What he did that cut through were some of the ads were riveting. I traveled overseas recently, and people in faraway lands knew about some of the ads. I think the McDonald's thing was big. I think the garbage truck was big. I think him being on Rogan and the podcast is definitely a new way to go for someone that is self-confident, someone that can hold forth, someone that sort of knows what they believe and isn't timid about saying it out loud. Authenticity.
It was said when he won that the Senate Republicans would bow down to him because he not only was he the president-elect, but that he'd won all these constituency votes, outdoing his performance 8 years ago and 4 years ago, getting a higher percentage, for instance, of the Black and Hispanic vote than most Republicans get. And yet they basically told him, sorry, you can't have Matt Gaetz, now two-way special justice correspondent, as his attorney general. You're a student of the culture of both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. Why was Donald Trump denied by the Senate his choice for attorney general?
Because he was a bad pick, but also because there's going back to Trent Lott, I used to work closely with him. There were always the usual suspects, as he called them, in the Republican caucus that could defect on any vote. He had like 6 usual suspects. This time around, there's only 3 usual suspects that could defect. So it's not a new phenomenon that you have some members in each conference that are not reliable. The only difference is this time Trump has fewer of the usual suspects that could defect than previous Republican presidents have had.
I want to ask you about some of the agenda items that Donald Trump clearly plans to work on, and ask you to project forward the likelihood that you think they'll happen, and if they do happen, what the contours will be. Taxes. There's going to be a big tax bill that extends for some number of years the current expiring Trump tax cuts. What else do you think will be in that bill, and are you fairly confident it will pass?
I'm confident that part will pass. I think you can divide things at this date in 2 big categories. Those things eligible for reconciliation, which taxes will be, and those things that are not eligible for reconciliation in a 50 vote in the Senate versus a 60 vote in the Senate. So group everything in those 2 big categories, with maybe a border exception. You may get some Democrats to vote for some border provisions.
Do you think the chances that Democrats vote for the tax cut bill, any Democrats, do you think the chances are negligible or non-existent?
Negligible.
Who are some Democratic senators who might vote for a tax cut bill?
Warner, Virginia.
Yeah. What if he includes an increase or an elimination of the cap on the deduction for state and local taxes? Might Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York senators vote for it then?
Probably not. Not from those states. Show me a more purplish state and somebody that's up for re-election.
So do you think Donald Trump in the year 2025 will pass any piece of legislation besides reconciliation that's of significance?
Again, I give the border legislation as a chance at having 60 votes in the Senate.
What about something on housing?
I mean, it depends on how it's all packaged, but I'm not real optimistic about much Democrat support in the Senate.
If you were Donald Trump's legislative affairs director and he said, Ed, I want to have the possibility to get 60 votes, so at least 7 Democratic senators on the tax bill, on immigration, on housing, maybe something to do with criminal justice reform. What should I do between now and Inauguration Day to maximize my chances? What would you tell him to do?
Catch bees with honey, not a bee swatter. I would roll out the red carpet. I would nurture some relationships. I would look at who I'm hiring and including that's in proximity to those characters. And they probably should have a working list of about 10 that are targets at any given time, where they're not naming and shaming from day one, but they're trying to be a little bit collaborative by Washington standards.
What about Chuck Schumer? Would you tell him he can build a working relationship with Chuck Schumer?
I just don't think that Chuck Schumer can stay leader and have a cooperative relationship.
If he works with him on a tax bill that would benefit New Yorkers?
Yeah, that would be a fragment of it. But I mean, I think the progressives they're gone dormant for a while, but they're going to come roaring back. I don't think the left has gotten a salient, convincing message here. Discount for my hand wringing and whining, but yeah, I don't see a pocket of consistently more moderate Democrat senators being reliable.
Okay.
Now, I don't see
Okay.
Schumer leading that effort either.
Yep. All right. So the president, just as we've been talking, the way the transition is announced, the head of the Office of Political Affairs, the director of the Office of Public Liaison, and maybe most appropriate to what we're currently discussing, someone who had been touted for this job, James Braid, is going to be the deputy assistant to the president and director of the Office of Legislative Affairs. He also worked closely previously with the Freedom Caucus and with Vice President Vance in the Senate. He's from North Carolina, so good, at least another Southerner in there. Do you know Mr. James Braid?
I do not. Who's political affairs?
Political affairs is Matt Brasseau, who
I
worked on the
wonder if
campaign.
I wonder if Matt was born when I was deputy director and the director of the Office of Political Affairs in 1985 or 86. Haley Barber's deputy. Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. But he's probably heard of you, and maybe you can have lunch with him and give him some pointers.
He should pay me tribute and have me over for a free meal.
He should.
Yeah.
All right. J.D. Vance, his role seems very big. And in previous administrations, particularly when it's a lame duck, there's always tension between the West Wing and the Office of the Vice President, because the Office of the Vice President tends to be trying to maneuver with the donors and the interest groups and traveling to states. My sense is that may not happen this time. I'm wondering what you think of JD. Let me ask it this way. If you were JD Vance's top political advisor and he said, Ed, by the midterm elections, I want to have cleared the field as much as possible. I want to be seen as the consensus choice of the donors and the groups, and maybe even get Donald Trump's endorsement. What would your advice be for how we should spend the next 2 years?
Well, you're right about the institutional tension. It's there, it's been there forever, and it'll be there to some degree between the Trump people, whatever that is, and the Vance people, whoever they are. But I'm a fan of JD. I was a JD believer ever since I read his book. He was definitely my pick for vice president. He can intellectualize Trumpism better than anybody. He's a rational voice for the MAGA movement. So I think that's very important. Another thing to watch about Vance. Trump notoriously hates to travel. And so if you see Vance out on the point in some of these hot spots, in some of these diplomatic fragile areas, Vance could be very powerful on the world stage himself. That said, the best thing I can tell Vance to do is to hire a bunch of Trump people so that you don't have, you need some familiarity between the two staffs. Don't have a clique of just Vance people who don't really know the Trump battles, the Trump legacy, the Trump insiders, and the Trump vibe.
So one of the president's nominees, who may or may not be confirmed, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., seems to want to reduce the interest of corporate interest, the influence of corporate interests, including big pharma, over decisions that relate to the health of Americans. How is K Street, how is the lobbyist community preparing for Bobby Kennedy to take office?
I mean, that is the one that has sort of gotten K Street's attention. Everybody thinks it almost doesn't matter who the nominees are because Trump is such a dominant personality. Everybody's going to want to be doing the Trump thing, not their own thing. Robert Kennedy may not be on that wavelength, just maybe he constitutionally he can't get there. So K Street is scratching their head. They are looking for his hires. They're wondering who's going to be appointed underneath it. There's a lot of uncertainty and therefore angst about RFK going to a big, meaningful place like HHS.
You are a student of American history. Oh, and by the way, if you'd like to get in on this questioning of Ed, I'm almost done. So if you'd like to ask Ed a question or make a comment, please raise your electronic hand if you're here on the two-way platform. And in just a moment, I'll be turning it over to you. You're a student of American history. You see what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have been appointed to do. Is there an analog that you can think of from American history for this Doge project?
Not a good one. I'm around long enough to remember Graham Rudman was going to straighten out spending and cure the debt, get us on a sound path forward. And then, what's his name from Clinton's former chief of staff? Who am I trying to think of? Simpson Bowles.
Yeah.
I remember Simpson Bowles. That was going to slay the dragon. So I'm skeptical about whether or not these outside entities that have all these good ideas can be formed, and that there's a gear meshing their expertise and good work and recommendations to the government. And they're not just in the executive power, but in the executive branch. They'll have to pass legislation for anything meaningful to happen. I'm not sure that gear is going to exist any more than it has with celebrity task forces in the past.
You worked in the Reagan administration, right?
Yep.
And what other administrations and presidential campaigns have you worked on?
Well, I worked for almost 10 years in the Reagan and Bush White House, and was certainly active in the Bush 92 campaign. Lee Atwater's deputy twice. Did my part in all the Republican presidential campaigns. I didn't vote for Trump in 16. I voted for him in 20, and I didn't contribute to him until after the guilty verdict in New York. After that, I thought what they have now done with lawfare is worse for democracy than anything Trump has done. And I am for Trump. I'm giving the maximum to Trump. What's been done with the lawfare cannot be undone. And it's a terrible thing that's still out there. It's a terrible thing that has been done for our democracy. No case that it wasn't a targeted prosecution, a contrived and constructed prosecution over one political enemy.
You have a great, yes, sir.
Okay, good.
You did. You have a great saying, which I'm hoping you'll be willing to share, about how the business community around the country needs to deal with Washington.
Washington is like a fire. Too close and you get burned. Too far away, you're out in the cold. You need to tend to the fire. Sometimes you need expert fire tenders to help you.
So we have, in addition to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, two very successful business people, we have a number of business people, including from Silicon Valley, who are down by the Mar-a-Lago fire quite regularly and who seem ready to move north 1,000 miles when the president-elect becomes president again. Is this business group, very smart, very accomplished people, is your sense that they're going to try to be super involved, not taking government jobs, but super involved from the outside in an unprecedented way, or is this just about the transition?
I've never met Elon Musk, but I'm a big fan. I think he's a unique American character for this age. I think what he's doing is unprecedented in any history. I can't think of an analogy of someone who has done what he has done from a commercial and now a political standpoint and combined the two and survived. But I don't know if he's going to get frustrated, get bored, get worn out, get worn out. I don't know how long he's going to be able to tolerate the realities that he's going to come up against with Congress, with the bureaucracy, et cetera. I don't know how much patience he's going to have, but he's a big net plus for him. He hangs in there.
Yeah. All right, Ed, thank you again. We couldn't be happier to have Ed Rogers here. Let's bring in Aaron Wells. Aaron, welcome in. Tell folks where you are. You're a Trump supporter, and question for Ed or comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm from Kentucky. I'm a local GOP chair in our county. And first of all, thank you for the platform.
Thank you.
Immigrated over here from before the election, and it's brought a lot of sanity for sure. First of all, then I have a young family, 3 daughters, and really got involved in politics because of them, because I want to kind of help shape the future for them, hopefully. And really, we're in a really rural area, and this is kind of like small ball, I think, for what Mr. Rogers does maybe, but am really interested in how to create maybe an organization that is really concerned about rural issues. The best way to do that, kind of, I know how to do social media and things like that, but, rural people seem to be on the outside, even in Kentucky, in Frankfort, they're on the outside a lot, especially when it comes to budgetary issues and things like that. And I guess raising money is maybe one of the biggest issues there. It's hard to have a voice if you don't have funds. So maybe just some strategies. I know you're from Alabama. My dad was born around Gadsden area, so I didn't know if maybe you from your past have some pointers.
Great question. Ed.
Yeah, just generally speaking, I mean, the rural vote has roared. There's going to be, if the Democrats are wise, there's going to be renewed competition for the rural vote. They're not going to just be dismissed and insulted as flyover population. So I think that mayors matter more than ever, county commissioners matter more than ever, your state legislators matter more than ever. And to keep a good bench, to recruit good candidates, to take the party serious, have serious party chairmen who are into the mechanics, not just somebody with a chip on their shoulder and an axe to grind and something they want to say, but the organizing and the candidate recruitment, blocking and tackling of politics has gotten a dose of adrenaline for Republicans, and it needs to continue to be fashioned. It does matter who the chairman of the RNC is going to be, all those things. And similarly with the Democrats, are they going to revert to a big city Democrat, or are they going to go with somebody that understands the heartland a little better? We will see.
Aaron, do you have a budget as county chair?
Just what we raise. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So,
and
and
how many people live in your county?
about maybe 20,000. So
What
pretty
did
small.
Etowah County do this time? What percentage for Harris?
Oh, I haven't looked at everything since they updated it, but it's maybe 30%.
I was going to say the over under was probably about 33.
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's right at like 70, 71-29, something like that.
Yeah. You know, Aaron, I always say when there's a county like that, like I was in Oklahoma after the Trump-Clinton election in 2016, and Hillary got about a third of the vote. Now that means if you pass 3 people on the street, one of them voted for Hillary Clinton. So it seems like a landslide, but you know, it's for every 2 people in your county, one voted for Kamala Harris.
And really, like the Republicans only took over the Kentucky legislature in like 2016. So there's still a lot of Democratic influence. Like my parents voted for Democrats whenever I was a kid. So it seems like the Republican Party, at least on the local level, is really unorganized in a lot of ways. They're new to power, and there's a very strong power structure in Frankfurt, but a little unorganized throughout, especially for rural issues.
Yeah.
So.
Aaron, I have to say, I can't think of a better reason for somebody to say they got involved in politics than they want their kids' future to be better. So great for you that did that. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, Donald, welcome in for Ed Rogers. Please go ahead.
Hey, I had just a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
One is that the Vance level, is it obviously he is now establishing himself within Trump's organization, and I wonder if Trump's by design or the strategy is that he is looking at Vance as carrying on a 4-year term to an 8-year term, and he's putting all the pieces into place for Vance to have an easy transition as the designated.
All right, let's let Ed answer that one. Ed, go ahead.
That doesn't sound like Trump, that he's got a master plan for the next person. Doesn't sound like Trump. It could develop that way, could evolve that way, but I doubt if there's much of a strategy in place. I mean, Trump's kind of I used to complain, Mark will appreciate this, when Lott was leader and Gingrich was speaker, I would tell Senator Lott, the speaker has a plan for the year 2050. You've got a plan for later this afternoon. We have a gap in our planning. Trump is not thinking 4 years, 6 years. He's not thinking about the party. He's kind of consuming what's in front of him and handling the pitches that he's thrown. So I would be very surprised if there's a plan or even many master planners around him, or if it'd be wise to do so now in the first place.
Susan Wild
enjoy the moment.
Susan Wild seems to be the whisper. I wonder if that's the reason why she's there, to be able to get him to plan.
Well, here's the great thing about this second Trump term. In this term, Trump knows all these people. They've been through battles together. They've seen each other under stress and strain, good times and bad. Trump's first term, he really didn't know these people. He didn't really know Reince Priebus. He didn't know his national security advisor, Henry Messer. They didn't know him. He didn't know them. They didn't know how to handle him, and vice versa. So the familiarity with Susie, with others on the staff, others in the cabinet, is a huge difference than what we had in 2016. The next huge difference will be there's not a special prosecutor. subpoenaing everybody. There's no Russia collusion hoax that's going to pop up. Trump is going to be able to tend to his business with a bunch of people around him that he knows and likes. Wildly different.
Donald, did you have a second question or third?
I did want to ask about I wanted to thank you for the platform. You do a tremendous job, even with a cold. But
Thank you.
The question I wanted to ask is also on the media part of this is you've been tossing around on the edges about how the media has been reacting. Are you going to have a show, or is there going to be a time where there should be a retrospective maybe on how the media kind of played to one side versus the other because they put their thumb on the scale?
Yeah, I mean, I like to consider pretty much every show to be about that to some extent, and we've certainly talked a lot about it during the campaign and in the morning show as well. I mean, we might do shows in the media. People really like to talk about that. As we develop new programming, we may well have a daily or weekly show just about the media. I'd like to have a little bit more robust operation at Two-Way to do that, so that we can really show people stuff, video clips and headlines, and do lots of research, because I don't like when people throw stuff around that's inaccurate. I don't like when they just say the media is biased with no examples, or the media is not biased with no examples. So my aspiration is to have the best show ever that's not a right-wing show about how left-wing the media is, or a left-wing show about how right-wing the media is, but just a fair show that tells people what the press did. And maybe we'll have that soon. In the meantime, people are always welcome to come on and ask media questions as people do. You ask kind of a meta media question, but we're always happy to take examples. And we do occasionally do shows with people like Drew Holden would talk about the media. So, but we'll do more of it because we know people are super interested in it. Thank you for coming on. Very grateful to you.
Thank you.
All right, another question for Ed. Sorry, hold on. I'm a little let's get Brandon in, because Brandon's a Democrat and Ed loves taking questions from Democrats. Brandon, welcome in, sir. You're all unmuted. Go ahead. Question for Ed.
Yeah, I'm a Democrat in rural Oklahoma. And the last gentleman kind of talked about the local party a little bit. My question, and I wish Dan was here, but I just feel like it's toxic to be a Democrat here. There's no hope. And I mean, there's 80% in both houses in the state. And I think Democrats have lost sight on how much change you can make by, running the state. And I think it could help in some of the swing states too, not losing 80% of the vote. But my question was just, and like I said, I wish Dan was here, but my question was about how you think we could build a Democrat Party in some of these rural areas. Because like I said, I mean, I don't even tell people I'm a Democrat, just because I don't want them to think I don't know. It's just kind of socially.
Yeah. Understood. Ed is a great student of both parties. Ed, what's the Democratic Party need to do to rebuild, and particularly in rural areas?
Well, there's going to be no shortages of autopsies and study groups and prayer groups and whatever else is going to come up with a host of reasons that they took this beating that they did. There's no substitute for candidates, good candidates running good campaigns, clawing their way back and winning elections. And for the Democrats, that kind of has to start at the top. I think that they've got to have people that are going to start running for president pretty soon, relatively, that are going to show a different patina, a more moderate, sensible, less obsessed with cliche buzzwords than they have been. And I think the state and local Democrats are going to have to insist on it, insist that we have more commonsensical leadership in the party that aren't trapped by the Twitter wing of the Democrat Party. I don't know how to do that, but that's what's got to happen. There won't be any autopsy or report that changes the day. It's got to start with candidates. And in my view of the Democrats, again, it has to kind of start at the top.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon, thank you. Ed, we're early. We won't hold you to it, but just from today, who would you say the three most likely Democratic presidential nominees will be in 2028?
Shapiro, Buttigieg, and a woman.
And a woman to be named later.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Ed, we're so grateful to you for making time. I don't know if you want to stick around and listen to our texting conversation. Uh, but before you go, if you do need to go, I want to bring in Thomas Peters. Thomas Peters, what year were Thomas Peters, what year were you born?
1985.
1985. So Ed, what were you doing in 1985?
I was special assistant to the president and deputy director of the Office of White House Political Affairs.
All right. Thomas, do you go by Thomas or Tom?
Thomas is slightly preferred.
Thomas, I always go with the slightly preferred. Thomas, what do you know about Ronald Reagan? I don't mean from the history books, but what do you know about him, how he communicated with voters? Because there wasn't texting then.
I like watching the clips, the famous clips like "This is my microphone." You know, those sort of pre-viral moments that still sort of echo through the ages. And I grew up in a Republican conservative household. My dad corresponded with Pat Buchanan, so I grew up sort of more politically aware than a lot of kids in the '90s in San Diego, California.
Yeah. Did you ever get to meet Lee Atwater?
I did not.
Yeah. So for those of you on the call who never met Lee Atwater, I met him a couple times, only in passing, to my regret. There's really nobody like him today. I say that advisedly. Ed, what would Lee Atwater be like in the age of social media and texting?
Dangerous, suicidal. Yeah, Lee was kind of the last of an era in some ways, the first of an era in other ways. Lee loved the notion, I don't know if he invented it, but the permanent campaign is here. H.W. Bush thought politics was a seasonal thing. Lee convinced him that the permanent campaign needed to exist. You know, Lee died in his second year in office, of H.W. Bush in office. And Lee would have loved the characters of politics today. He would have loved Trumpism. Lee talked about Trump, and he and Roger Stone were very close personally and all. Had a sort of a frenemy relationship, but Lee would have liked the fact that Trump could tap in. He would have loved the Trump base and what to do with that and how to try to direct it. Lee would enjoy it, but would Lee be crazy and reckless with the likes of Twitter? Yes, you know.
Ed, are you situated such that you get texts from Democrats asking for money, or just from Republicans?
No, I get my firm gives a lot of money to Democrats, so I'm overwhelmed like everyone else.
Yeah, and how do you feel about those texts?
Well, they're pedantic on both sides. I mean, really, am I supposed to read? The Republicans do. Oh, really? I'm supposed to read this, and you know, we're $800 behind. Send in $25. It's pedantic. It's insulting. I can't believe it. They must do it because it's successful, right? If it
We're
wouldn't,
about to find out. Please stay with us. Thomas Peters is in the business, and he's very successful at it, of sending those pedantic, annoying texts that probably no one thinks they like to get, and yet they continue to be sent, which, as you point out, Ed, must mean they're working. Thomas, welcome in. Tell us how your business works. What are the kind of the foundations of the business, both your individual firm, but also the political texting business, and how you see the present and the future for something that people seem not to like, and yet is growing very rapidly, and you've made a fortune off of. Go ahead. Floor is yours, sir.
Well, not a fortune, but a good enough living to stay in business, which on the Republican side is half the struggle is to stay above water. I have an axiom that when it comes to political technology, Democrats invent, Republicans perfect. And so you can think about Howard Dean being the first campaign to raise money online, but it was the Republican money bombs of like the Ron Paul era that really opened campaigns' eyes to the idea you could raise millions of dollars in a day online. And in every political technology channel you can think of, whether that's email or television, Democrats normally were there first and better, but then Republicans really operationalized it and scaled it to a massive degree. That's the same thing that happened in texting. So in political texting, it was Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2015, his insurgent campaign, that used peer-to-peer texting, so text sent one by a human being, as we do with our platform, to organize and win the Iowa caucuses and beat Hillary Clinton. And after the 2016 cycle, At the time, we were building campaign apps. We built the campaign app for Ted Cruz for president. We built Donald Trump for president's campaign app in 2016. The only technology that I saw that I was jealous of as a Republican was this peer-to-peer texting. And so that's what caused us to launch Rumble Up in 2018. And we were one of the first Republican vendors to enter the space and have since become one of the largest vendors. Republicans text, Democrats text because it works. It works for many reasons. One, texting is the most visible channel. I know I sound like an ad for texting right now, but I say this a lot. So I'm just trying to lay down some the facts and then get into the questions. And then
I'll interrupt you if you start to get into propaganda. So far, so good.
Okay, I'll try to stay informative in the spirit of two-way. Texting works because 98% of text messages are opened in read, and the vast majority of those are opened in read within 90 seconds. The ideal user.
Well, hold on. I want to stop you right there. You said the vast majority are read within 90 seconds, meaning well over 50%.
Yes.
That's an incredible stat. Now, I want you to clear something up that I know, but probably most people on here don't. Is it the FCC that regulates texting?
The FCC regulates texting.
Yeah. So you can't send. You can't send texts en masse. They literally have to be sent by a person hitting send, right?
That's the safest interpretation of the legal and FCC requirements. There's a little bit of dispute, but we always try to take the safest route to keep our clients safe.
So if you're getting campaign from a Senate campaign or a major presidential campaign, that is not being sent automated. That's being sent by somebody pressing a button.
If it's coming from a local number, the short codes are different. So if you subscribe to Donald Trump's short code, that is, one button being sent to 8 million plus people.
What does that mean? What does that mean to subscribe to his short code?
So if you text join to Trump's short code, I think it's 88088, or if you text join to Ron DeSantis' short code 512345, that is giving that campaign permission to mass blast text you. But if you receive a text that you don't remember signing up for from a local number, that most likely is sent from an individual volunteer one at a time.
So what do you pay someone for that job?
It could be about a cent or less, or most campaigns actually have volunteers.
And is it ever done outsourced from India or other places like that?
We only do it domestically in the United States, and that is the vast preference. And I'd say the vast majority of campaigns that are sending text are sending from US-based people over 18 years old.
So your company, Rumble Up, designs apps, sends texts. What else do you do?
That's all we do. That's more than enough for me.
Those two things. So you said 90% are read or opened.
90%
the vast majority
are read.
Yep. The vast majority are read within 90 seconds. What's the success rate of the most successful efforts?
I always
where people give something.
The use case of texting for fundraising is the most controversial because it's being abused. There are too many fundraising texts being sent, but it remains the oftentimes biggest source of small dollar money raised. And so an individual campaign, what's amazing about texting is that for the right campaign, the right message and the right audience, a text message campaign can be successful as a net revenue positive on day one. You contrast that with a direct mail program where the first 9 months are pure investment of sunken money, and you only go positive on that ROI investment in the final 6 weeks of the campaign. So texting is the quick, injection of adrenaline into a campaign.
I'm going to turn you over to Ed. Go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
Just what's the stop rates you get? What percentage type in stop like me?
It's about 8 to 12% in a well-targeted campaign of people just saying from the get-go, not interested.
Is that
why?
Do you think there's more awareness of stop as an option?
It's now required by the FCC and by the phone carriers that outbound messages include at the bottom reply stop to end or reply stop to unsubscribe. Okay. And our platform actually at a software level prohibits that campaign from texting that individual again. Now, one of the areas for reform that I'm a strong advocate of is cracking down on bad vendors that do not honor that opt-out and continue sending texts.
You said Republicans perfect. One thing where there is a negative asymmetry for Republicans is Democrats in general continue to be better at raising small dollars online than Republicans are. The example I always give, Jamie Harrison in South Carolina had no chance to beat Lindsey Graham. He raised over $100 million online.
Right.
What is it that's keeping your party from raising as much online? Is it cultural? What is it?
I think a lot of it is cultural. So Democrats have a stable base of about 6 million small dollar donors. Republicans are about 2.5 to 3 million. And Trump vacuums up a lot of that energy, and he's done so now for almost a decade. And so it's a lot more difficult for down ballot Republicans to break through that noise and to have the same urgency of their asks, especially this cycle where you had the indictment, you had all of these iconic moments, the assassination attempt that just, to Ed's point, got him off the bench to start donating.
The entire universe of Democratic small dollar donors is 6 million, and the entire universe of Republican small dollar donors is 2.5 million.
Not the entire, but the number of people who have a saved profile on the respective donation platforms. So for Democrats, that's Act Blue. For Republicans, that's Win Red.
Okay, so how could Donald Trump only have 2.5 million, even if they're all his donors? There's only 2.5 million. Donald Trump has fewer than 2.5 million people who've given to him, or many people have given to him, but not through Win Red.
I think the number is not that high. I'm sure there's individual donors who have given other platforms, but the stable universe that I've heard of, again.
Okay, so his team, starting in 2016 with Brad Parscale and you helping them for 10 years, they've understood that the best way to raise money is through small dollar donors. And in that time, they've had fewer than 3 million people who've given small dollars to Donald Trump.
I honestly don't know. So I don't want to say something I don't know. I know his text messaging list has to be over 8 million. We don't manage that. But the number of people who give to Republican campaigns is actually small. The number of people who give very frequently or max out is relatively high. And so one of the things that we've seen in the last 2 cycles is just donor fatigue. You've been giving to Donald Trump for 10 years. You've probably not maxed out, but it takes something special to give. I think I know this is a problem that the Republican Party is very actively trying to work on. And it is true that with Republicans having a lot of support in voters who are less frequent voters, those are people who are low down on a chain of engagement that they want to eventually bring up to be stable recurring donors.
Interesting. Ed, any more questions you want to ask before we open it up to the group?
What's the model construct of a text? How many words?
So it could be anywhere between 160 to 320 characters for a simple plain language text, or it could be up to 2,000 words or more for a multimedia message. The Democrats prefer to send these sort of like tomes, these like emails in a text message. Republicans tend to be a lot snappier, a lot more of like
2,000. That's hard to get through. 2,000.
It is. And I don't quite understand why Democrats still send these massive long text messages. It's not something that is frequently done on the Republican side. Republicans are a lot more effective with including multimedia, so a video or a GIF or something like that to get people riled up and excited to click through a link to go to a donation page, and that's where a longer description might sit. We are less in the fundraising business than a lot of our competitors on the right. We focus a lot more on the other use cases for texting, so persuasion, polling, advocacy, and local issues, down ballot things.
When I wasn't around, Lee Atwater would have loved good anonymous mailing. Do you do anonymous text?
No. It's a pretty strong requirement, if not an absolute requirement, that texts identify who is the one sending. And I think that's an area that requires even further tightening up, because if you aren't required to disclose who you are, that raises the possibility of fraud and scams and other things that are truly bad.
I want to share a little news that's breaking out unrelated to texting. Someone asked me today about Donald Trump and tariffs, and I said I didn't think they'd be announced anytime soon. I thought he would wait a little bit, have an initial round of consultations once in office, see if he could intimidate people into backing down without it. I was wrong. He announced on Truth Social that on the first day in office, he will impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico and a 10% additional tariff on China beyond what's already in place. So for those of us who thought the tariffs were not going to be a thing at the start, and that doesn't mean he'll actually do it. He could be just speaking loudly and carrying a medium-sized stick, but I was wrong. I was wrong about that. All right, let's bring in questions for Thomas and for Ed. John Birch, you probably get a text every so often from a presidential campaign, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, I sure do. Actually, most of them, even though I'm a Republican, that I've gotten are Democratic ones. I'm not quite sure how that happens. I have a question, a very general question. Trump's political capital at this point is based mainly on the fact that there was just an election and he was winning, and a lot of other people saw the power trying to be on his same ticket, and that's going to last maybe for another 2 years, given that he's a lame duck president. But is he a lame duck president? What options does he face to try to get the right, or at least the reality of staying on as a president for another term? How could he go about doing that? I don't doubt that he will want to. I don't know what options he might actually face to do it.
He'd have to have the Constitution amended, and that's not going to happen. So I don't really think he has any options. Gentlemen, you want to differ on that?
I'm a good analyst to talk to about Trump because I get Trump wrong 100% of the time, and there's some predictive value in that. But I think he knows this is it. He may be a little relieved that he doesn't have to prove himself and clear another hurdle one more time. So I don't expect him to flirt with it and taunt people.
Yeah. John Birch, I'll tell you one way he could do it. I don't think it'll happen, but if you're looking for an elegant way, he runs with somebody else as vice president and makes that person basically a caretaker and figurehead, and he's the president, but he does it from the vice president's office. He could do that for 8 more years, but that's not going to happen.
His other option is, of course, to help groom someone to replace him in MAGA. And who, I mean, is he really willing to do that?
Well, as Ed suggested, it's not really his orientation, but at some point after the midterms, attention will turn to 2028, and he'll face a decision about whether to endorse. On the current trajectory, if passed as an all prologue, his endorsement in a presidential primary, even for an open seat, would be extraordinarily powerful. The last few vice presidents who ran, not counting Kamala Harris in this unorthodox situation, but George H.W. Bush and Al Gore, both had late and tepid endorsements from presidents whose popularity was within the party was high, but not this high, I don't believe. And if Trump decided to endorse in 2027, I think it could be pretty powerful if he stays as popular within the party as he is now.
If he is in fact a lame duck president, will he then generally lose a lot of his power in 2 years after the midterms?
No question. Power begins to flow out of the place after the midterms of the final term. No question. People begin to move on. You have a shorter calendar with the Congress. You've lost some of your fear factor.
Is he already losing his political power, a little capital, at least to some extent, and if not with the senators, at least with the general public? Mark, a lot of the people on this platform have described themselves as reluctant Trump voters, but I'm not sure we've ever had much of a discussion of what's the nature of that reluctance. And are they how soon will their reluctance turn into, as they say, voters' remorse?
If he stays off TV the way he's been doing, and if he emphasizes closing the border and producing more energy, other things that might reduce inflation, reducing regulation, and ending the forever wars, I think he could stay pretty popular. because those are all popular things, not just with the so-called MAGA base. As I said before, those are pretty broadly popular. So we'll see. He does have less power as a lame duck, but even new presidents only have a lot of power for the first about 100 days plus. And so Trump's a pretty skillful guy and unburdened with having to get reelected. He might do some things that are popular and that maybe appeal more to the middle potentially than appeal to the right, because he doesn't need that anymore. John, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. All right.
I think
Welcome it. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Trump's the most institutionally powerful president since Eisenhower.
Because
a lot of people that got elected to the House in the last decade, a lot of people got elected to Senate are Trump people. They were elected as part of
yeah,
my team. The construction of the Supreme Court, the number of governors, the number of Republican legislators that have all pledged allegiance to Trump is unprecedented in my life.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to let you ask a question of Ed, but the price of asking a question for Ed is you got to ask a question of Thomas about texting first.
Well, can I do it in reverse order?
You can.
Okay. Ed, my question, I perked up when you talked about Graham Rudman, because I used to work for Phil Graham.
Saw Phil Graham in Beijing last week, 82 years old, holding forth in a hotel lobby, just like the old days. And Phil,
that sounds like him. Yeah,
Jeff, have I ever told you my Phil Graham stories? I'll save it for next time.
Well,
go ahead.
I worked for Graham when D'Amato lost. Chuck Schumer beat him, and Graham became banking committee chairman, and I worked on the banking committee. And there was a guy by the name of Russ Vogt who used to drive Phil around. He was Graham's driver. So he would drive Graham around, and Ruth, who, when I say Ruth, you know who Ruth is. So you going back to the Graham Rudman, and I'm really worried about our debt and so forth. What do you think is achievable?
Go ahead.
What do you think is achievable in terms of on the balance, our debt and deficits and stuff, through the reconciliation, et cetera?
Good question. Trump has never been a deficit hawk. He sort of gives lip service to wanting a sound set of books and not having too much debt, whatever that means. But Republicans and Democrats have decoupled spending and income 20 years ago. They've been no connection. I don't know what's going to happen absent a crisis to put those things back together. I don't know if years of sustained 4% growth would lift us out of our debt like it did for a while back in the late 80s, early 90s. So we will see. But
yeah, we would kill to have the problems we had during Graham Rudman.
That begins to roll back.
Those were small problems. All right, Jeff, I'm letting you off the hook. You don't need to ask a question to Thomas because we're going to have to wrap for a variety of reasons. But thank you for coming back, asking your question. Appreciate it. Thomas, thank you for joining. We appreciate you giving us that education, and we hope you'll come back. And I know you're a fan of the platform, which we appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. And Ed, thank you. We always like having you here. And we hope you come back after your bowl game victory and explain how the Tide did it.
I feel good about it. Okay.
All right. Thank you all. See you at 9 a.m. tomorrow right here on the morning meeting with Dan and what's his name? And we've got some more surprises in the morning, which you won't want to miss. That's a fake tease. We just got the normal stuff. Have a great evening, everybody. See you at 9 a.m.